What happens when a stripper and a religious protester are trapped together in a peep show booth?
It's the end of the world.
Well, 13th floor film guru Oxford Lamoureaux finds out when he interviews the director and the star of the Shudder film Revealer. Oxford talks to film director Luke Boyce and actor Kato Iase about making Revealer, a film described as a horror buddy movie hybrid, or as Oxford himself calls it in his review, a neon-filled sassy spookfest. Okay, over to you, Oxford.
I'm here now speaking with the director and one of the stars of the film, of Revealer. So I'm speaking to Luke and Kato. How are you two doing?
Great. How are you?
Yeah,
Fantastic.
good. How are you?
Very good. Thank you for taking the time to join me all the way from Chicago. Are you coming from?
Yep.
That's correct.
Wonderful, nice. So fantastic. So I'm here to ask you some questions about Revealer. And I guess the first thing is for Luke, really, is what was your initial inspiration with the story? I guess how did it come to you and how did it then change as you were developing it up to, kind of getting ready to produce, I guess?
Yeah. So so me and Tim Seeley had been working together on some stuff and wanting to do something on a smaller level. We've been working on some bigger stuff, and that takes a little bit more time. And it was 2020 and we had both been stuck in our houses as everyone else had for a few months for quarantine. And my producer, a couple of my producers kind of brought up the idea of well, would you and Tim be willing to come up with a story that could basically be made in a pandemic, basically feature as little characters as possible, single location, just kind of gave it to us as sort of a thought experiment, really. And we're like, yeah, what about Tim? Tim basically was the one who came up with the idea, and pretty much instantly it was like, what about a stripper and a religious protester stuck in a peep show booth? And I mean, Tim is amazing at these high concept things. Everyone was like, yeah, that sounds good. Because it was great, because we were thinking, initially both characters would only talk to each other through a wall. So we were like, oh, this is great. They don't have to interact. Our actors don't have to interact. They can be in their own bubbles. Because we did shoot this in the summer of 2020, still in quarantine, and things were like we were one of the first that we know of to start shooting. There weren't a lot of rules for shooting during the pandemic. So our whole crew quarantined together. Everybody, we were literally, the entire crew was either in our hotel rooms separate or on set. And even on set, you were testing multiple times a week. Everyone was wearing masks and, just, we had tiers and things like that. So the whole thing was very, very contained, because we just, we were just doing our best trying to get through it without, we were a small production. So one positive test was going to shut us down. So a lot of this came out of, trying to do something during the pandemic, but what it was important for us to not make a pandemic movie, to not make a movie that was about the pandemic. We wanted to make something that would, exist outside of it, just using the parameters and the limitations that we had to try to come up with something fun, basically.
Cool. Yeah. So you went straight for apocalypse of a pandemic.
Yeah.
Nice.
Like the end of the world, so why not?
Well,
we all felt it.
I was actually going to say, I was going to ask what was the most challenging part of getting the movie made and kind of doing production, but I mean, we can skip right over that.
Yeah.
No, but that's really interesting. Okay, so cool. And so Kato, how were you first introduced to Revealer? And I guess what were your initial thoughts on, I guess, both the script and the demands of the film and being made?
Yeah. So March hit, and it was that moment of, oh God, are we ever going to be able to do what we love ever again? And there was a lot of kind of sitting at home wondering what the fate of film and television and theater and performance in general was going to be, which is my life's blood. And just when I was feeling like, well, I guess I need to start looking at doing something else, I got a call from Sarah Casey, who's our casting director and a very good friend of mine. And she said, so you won't believe it, but a script landed on my desk. And how would you feel about auditioning for a 1980s stripper who slays demons? And I was like, how could I pass this up? And I read it, and beyond just the like amazing campy fun, you know, the like Stranger Things kind of visuals that were popping into my mind's eye, the script is just so earnest and so sincere and so raw in a lot of ways. And I had been kind of champing at the bit to do a horror film. I've always really wanted to have horror on my resume, and I had been very much a theater actor for a very long time and was dipping my toes into film, and had done one other feature. And it was kind of this there's a little bit of an ethos of, well, we don't do horror in Chicago very much. And then I meet Luke and the whole group, and I was like, au contraire, my friends. So but yeah, I was immediately sold on the premise, and then I was immediately sold on the script because I am also a huge nerd, which you can't tell because I have nothing in the background, but I knew who Tim was. I didn't know who Michael was at the time, but like since have found out the expansive amount of work that he has done, and is a wonderful human being. So just getting the opportunity to combine 80s stripping, demons, horror, comic books into a movie, it was like, I feel like I was born to do this.
Yeah. Nice. Well, so that's great. So I'll just have to ask about the visual aesthetic of the film. It is amazing. And I guess this is a question kind of for both of you is, I love the neon retro 80s, like you said, that whole comic book. There's something kind of innocent, but also very playfully kind of dangerous about it in a way. It's nice. But I was curious. So how did that develop kind of for both of you? Was that a kind of thing that started like right from the beginning, or was it something that kind of you developed and kind of touched on and added in more kind of as the film kind of went on? Or how did the aesthetic kind of, I guess, begin and then develop for you both?
Yeah, I mean, having it set in the 80s was, you know, a great start. I mean, Tim and I are both children of the 80s. You know, a lot of the things we love are from that era, but you know, we're both kind of into this sort of modern interpretation of the 80s as well. You know, we're kind of in this point, I think in it's sort of like the 80s to us, of the way kind of the 50s and the 60s were, you know, in the 80s and the 90s. So there's this sort of reality 80s, and then there's this sort of pop culture 80s sort of vision of the 80s. It's not, you know, some of it's real, some of it's not, and it's sort of like you get to sort of play in the sandbox of visual aesthetics, like you said, like neons, things like that. We knew right away we could do that because it was set in a, you know, fictional adult bookstore, you know, with strippers. So I mean, you know, we're like, well, yeah, there's going to be neons, which is great. For me, that was a big thing because I really want to see more color, and especially horror. I just, you know, we're getting to this kind of drab, overbearing sense within modern film aesthetics. And I think that has a lot to do with sort of the overabundance of digital. And so it was really important for me to bring a lot of color in. And our cinematographer, Rob Stern, immediately kind of knew exactly. I mean, we had a plan to add more color than we even could. We kind of we ended up sort of pulling back. Yeah, I can see that you're a big fan.
Huge.
Which I love. Yeah, you ought to see. I've got a little home arcade in another room over here.
I do as well.
It is neon. Nice. I have
a full arcade machine with Raspberry Pi running it, but yeah, it's brilliant. But so
we seem to be very similar. We're our Halloween,
yeah.
Your Halloween, your Slice, your video games.
I know.
Bye, Kato.
Yeah, hello, brother.
Let me get my neon.
Yeah.
Okay. So I guess for Kato is how did you feel that with that aesthetic, how did you feel that it influenced, I guess, your maybe the performance or just your getting into that character and being in that world? Like you said, there's a lot of brown in the 80s, you know, there's a lot of beige and brown, and so this is the complete opposite of that, where it's full, fun, playful color. So how did you kind of approach that as well in filming?
Yeah, I love this question. As Luke was talking, the things that were coming to mind is like very much what is happening now, like he was referencing, is these kind of like drab, muted color palettes, and then you kind of think of like Neon Demon, Bliss, like those really high saturated horror films that are fairly recent. That kind of are like outliers in terms of aesthetic right now. And it was also, we were starting to make this film around the time that like Stranger Things was huge and Glow was on, and there's very much that 80s aesthetic going on. So there was a lot of that kind of buzzing around in the air. And when I got to set, the set itself, like the peep show setup that we had, was actually kind of muted and drab, but then we had these huge like neon, deeply saturated color things. So when you were on set, it did give you that kind of like dusty smoker fingernails vibe of the 80s. But then they turned on all the lights and it was like, oh my God. Especially when we were filming the dance scene, all of that, the majority of the light that was in there is like, I know we had our colorist working on all of the additional color, but there was so much light on the set that it just immediately kind of dropped you into this like heightened fantasy realm. And the costumer, Hallie Sharp, is amazing, big fan, and she really got the memo on it and put me in that, the high-waisted swimsuit. And we very much wanted to play with Angie having a lot of reflective color. Like I was wearing a lot of silver and I had the silver shoes and the silver necklace. Like there's a lot of things that reflect off of Angie. And I do think that there's actually a little bit of, because Angie is such a mirror to other people, she can see who they really are and say, have you considered this? And her ability her wearing reflective detailing and being a reflective person, I thought very much informed the character. And it was kind of, it was so easy to just drop in and snap into this persona of this punk who's just not going to take shit from anybody.
Yeah, I love it. Well, I mean, so, and one of my favorite parts, I mean, so the writing in the film is outstanding and your performance is brilliant, but I am a big fan of witty, snappy one-liners. And I won't spoil it, but there are some absolutely dynamite ones in this. And I love it. And so it's interesting because I feel like Angie, there's such authenticity to both her character and your performance, I found, where there's a bit towards the end where we're going to go out for tacos, and it's that, and there's an issue I find with most films where something like that can be very cheesy, and it can be like, oh gosh, but then with the authenticity of both the performance and the character being natural, it's one of those moments where it's not Kato, the actress, trying to say this, it's Angie trying to like really dive deep. And I loved that particularly. It's just the smaller parts of it, the writing and everything were amazing. But I guess the question in this for both of you is really like, so how much of you, Luke, is put into the film itself and the writing, and how much was kind of, I guess, created and structured, and then Kato, is how much of Angie is naturally you? How much, and it can be a zero, but like how much, I guess, was there anything that you needed to kind of pull from outside of that, or was it really just diving into a little part of yourself, I guess? So
yeah, I mean, I didn't script anything. I mean, I helped with the story a bit, but I didn't quite script anything, so I couldn't say that dialogue wise there's much of me there. The aesthetic for sure is very much me. I mean, I'm very much into the kind of that, like we were talking about, that sort of synthetic 80s synthwave, just sort of like evoking a time that's sort of between the 80s and the 90s a little bit. And that was one, we kind of pushed it to 87, so you're sort of getting a little bit closer to that. So a lot of the aesthetics there are just sort of aesthetics that I love, just sort of like my my tastes and stuff like that. And in terms of the characters, you know, I can speak for, especially on Angie for sure. Like that is pure Tim Seeley. I mean, both Tim and Mike wrote, and I know Mike wrote a lot of, and I think even there might have been a couple great lines that Angie speaks that are Michael Morisi lines. But you know, when Tim first pitched the project, you know, Angie was kind of the first character that really came out of that. He knew who Angie was right away. And I think, like, you know, one of the things I love about Tim and all of his works is he has these really, really defined female characters. It's kind of his staple, I think, like Cassie Hack, Dana from Revival. I'm trying to think. So he's got a couple other newer ones and I can't think of their names, but they all sort of have that similar kind of, which is kind of Tim, just sort of this really charming but biting kind of humor that's kind of the defense mechanism a little bit. You know, it's there to keep people just a little bit at bay, you know, somewhat. And he's just really good at writing that. He's just so phenomenal at getting that character out. And I think that's one of the best things about having comic book writers. Your script is that on the comic book page, you don't have a lot of room for subtlety. I mean, you really have to have those characters feel defined. And they're in the head of they're not being performed by someone, they're in the head of the author. And so I think both Michael and Tim have really honed their craft enough to be able to really create these very defined characters. And that was, for me, that was one of the best things about working with them.
That's amazing. And so Cato, then, well, I guess that kind of almost answers that really, in that, so clearly it wasn't specifically changed or written kind of for you. It was very much just a perfect fit. So, I mean, so how did you feel in terms of, did you just naturally instantly click and fall in with Angie as a character, or was there anything that you,
there's a lot that she says that I'm like, I'm pretty sure that I say that consistently. And the amount of play that we got with the script, of being able to do multiple takes and try different things, and really, like, Luke was just so incredibly supportive in terms of before we shot any scenes, just right before we would go in for each scene, Luke would sit down with us, we would read through it, we would talk through it, we would address like any lines that we were kind of struggling with, anything that might have felt bumpy, or would put us in a place of like feeling like Cato or Shayna, the actor, rather than the actual character. Luke was so willing and ready to just jump in with us and talk through all of that with us. And there were also a number of moments in the text where Luke just kind of let us off the leash, and we were able to kind of play with some ad libs, and sometimes it was too much and sometimes it was like exactly what we needed. But that ability to play within the language itself, I think, just made it all the more fun and all the easier to snap into that. I like to think I'm pretty quippy myself.
Yeah.
I mean, so I'll jump in and say, like, when I saw Cato's audition tape, I mean, we got like maybe 60 auditions, and I knew Cato was Angie immediately. And a lot of that had to do with how defined the character was, and how Cato was maybe one of maybe just a couple people who just understood the cadence of that. Like, it was so natural. She did things in her audition that nobody else did. I mean, her little splooge action at the beginning of the movie is all Cato. I mean, she did that in her audition tape, and it was like, the second I saw it, I was like, I mean, that's it for me. That's all I needed to say. Yeah, pretty much.
It's an interesting. So, I mean, I'm not going to talk about myself too much, but when I was younger, I was a bartender. And so that was a huge thing for me in terms of being directly in front of people and learning to be quick on your feet, learning to improvise, and learning to, not, like you said, not necessarily have a constant defense mechanism, but always be ready for it. You know, to always kind of like keep it at bay. And there's a very natural thing, which, again, like you said, pretty much the moment that you appear on screen, that first shot where you're walking towards the store and you're having a conversation outside, and you basically just give your fingers up and walk off. And I was just like, I'm sold 100%. Like, this is nice. Authentic, genuine. This character's this is me in a way. There's so much relevance, which is amazing, because I mean, so I'll try not to touch too much on the themes of the film in, I guess, kind of modern kind of social things, but there's a big push for acceptance, and there's a big narrative of sexuality and everything in there. And one of the things that I loved about it is that, you know, it's, so I'm a guy, you know, I'm a guy, and I love, you know, kind of everything, but there was no separation for me. I wasn't watching two girls. I mean, I was, but I mean, I was watching two human beings kind of have the same things. And that balance is amazing, because it just broadens the audience and the understanding, and you share these concepts, I think, and this kind of feeling, and there's genuine joy, you know, there's genuine joy of watching these characters go through the same thing that I have gone through, and many of my friends have gone through as well. And it's that I find is fantastic. So I mean, I just wanted to say that, because, you know, it's it's a huge thing to have an entertaining film with heart, I find. But just kind of moving really around that to, I guess, the funnest kind of parts of filming this, the bits that you felt were the nicest, most expressive, enjoyable parts. Obviously, we've talked about being stuck in, you know, masks and pandemic kind of everything. But so what were the best parts? What was the standout elements of kind of making this film for you?
Kato, do you want to go?
Yeah, I do.
Okay.
I always just get kind of dreamy when I think about the filming process on this, because it was something that was pure magic in my mind. I would say one of my favorite scenes to film was that dance sequence. That was the first thing that we shot. So, you know, Luke and Rob, our DP, we got together and kind of mapped out the space, because it truly was an 8x8 room, and we were trying to figure out, how do we make an 8x8 room, a dance sequence in an 8x8 room, compelling and interesting, without feeling like you're kind of viewing her through this like diorama. And we shot that whole song is like 5.5 minutes long, and we shot like 7 iterations of it. It was just like, we went through and we changed and we moved the walls. So it was so cool to feel like I was in a music video, you know, in the middle of this film, and that it just felt so perfect. That is like one of the more exciting moments for me. But then also just the scenes with Shayna, and I've been singing her praises all week, but Shayna is one of the best scene partners I have ever gotten to work with in all of my years of acting. She and I both come from theater backgrounds. We both have done a lot of Shakespeare, which requires you to listen a lot and to really dissect what you're saying and what the other people are saying, what's the context and what's the subcontext and all of that, or subtext rather. And Shayna is just so present, and she's so giving, and she's just an open-hearted person. So even when we got to do these really funny, quippy back and forth scenes where we're kind of just like snipping at each other, and then one of us says something really real, or like something happens outside, having those moments of just getting to be in her presence and around that energy was so amazing, from like the very quippy scenes to the really, really heartfelt scenes that kind of broke both of us down as actors, and the support and love that we got from Luke and Rob and everyone on set. It's just, and I had no qualms with any of the filming. It was all just so wonderful.
Amazing. Well, so I mean, I have to say, so a big part of that dynamic between those two characters is the frustration that you have with listening, and then obviously it's, you know, you the balance. I think it propels Angie's character as well, along with the rest of the film, which I love. I mean, it's obviously, you know, it's very easy to say, oh, it's hard to get on board with someone who's hateful, bigoted, directed in that sense. But at the same time, then you watch the vulnerability underneath that kind of reveal itself as well. Pardon the pun, but I love that. Okay, well, so I guess, the last, before we get into some wonderful fun stuff questions, I guess, what's the end process for you? How do you feel? When is a film done? When do you cut off? When do you separate yourself? I guess, Luke, how do you say, I'm ready to put this child out into the world now?
Oh man, that's a really good question. Wow. You know, that's kind of part of, I guess, you don't ever really know. You know, we actually just finished, we literally just finished our QC right before it goes out, and we even changed a couple things there. But in most cases, I think, you know, there's a world where you sort of just know, you sort of start to just lose that objectivity, and you just sort of have to walk away. You've done everything you can with it. And I don't think any artist would ever say something is completely 100% done. There's obviously always going to be things that you wish you could have changed or wanted to do differently. But there's a world. I mean, this is a movie that I'm not ashamed to say I'm really proud of. I love this movie. I've seen it, you know, shockingly. I've been doing this for a long time, and I know what it feels like to edit things and to do things, and you've seen something a thousand times, and at a certain point you just get numb to it. And every time I watch this movie, I have a great time. I mean, there's a combination of things. I love watching Kato and Shayna. I just, you know, and I think that's a big part of it. I mean, they carry the entire film on their backs, and I think, you know, I literally can't begin to tell you how amazing it is to have them, because, you know, it is them for 86 minutes and you just want to keep watching. I mean, it's just, and it's fun to watch them. It's fun to sort of see the evolution of their relationship, to see what they go through, to kind of see the revelations that happen. So yeah, I think that there was a point where, you know, I think, you know, you get a few bits of feedback here and there, and you know, you kind of just let it go. I guess, you know, it's hard to say it. It's a great question, but it's a hard one to answer, I think.
Well, I think that's a big part of why I asked these questions. I mean, some of the people who will be watching this will be in the same position, or will be kind of studying that process. And there's a big, you know, so when I first started writing, how do you finish? How do you end? When do you put a book? And having to just, take that risk to put something out that could be beneficial for people to have it out there, versus just kind of perpetually trying to make it perfect and then losing the moment, I guess, to kind of put it out, really. But
well, it's a good question, because I very specifically remember my art teacher growing up, who was a big, very important person to me, very big influence to me. And one of the things she taught was walking away, was just getting to I remember very specifically her teaching us how to get to a point with our project, whatever that was, to say, okay, you can continue to work on this, but there is a point where the more you work on it, the more you might actually harm it. You have to learn how to step away at a certain point. And that's sort of it's hard to say what that is. It's just sort of a feeling you have to have, you know, that you have to train yourself to have in some cases. And I know some artists that I kind of wish I could tell them, I think you need to stop right now and walk away from the project, because it is just something I think that's really difficult. It's a really, really, really important point to make.
Yeah, fantastic. I will admit this. I've watched the movie 4 times, and I love it. And it's
Wow.
and so I'm not even joking. So I watch movies constantly, but I watched it the first time and then again immediately, and I was like, I love this film. This is amazing. And so immediately reached out and was like, I have to promote this, have to talk to you, because it's rare for me. It's rare for me to discover a film which is so fun and enjoyable in that sense, and horror just encapsulates that perfectly. So I'm just like, you have to see it. You have to watch this film, because it's just fun and nice. It's what we need.
Well, let me be real for you for a second, because I this is my first feature film, and I have to be perfectly honest that I'm feeling very vulnerable right now. I don't know what to expect in 2 weeks. You hearing that, I think means more to me than I think I could really convey to you, because knowing that I do love the film so much, and this feeling of, you know, it's hard to sort of like force yourself to detach a little bit, because you don't, you know, and everything, you know, art is subjective, and there's going to be people who like it and people who don't like it, and sort of like, you know, but when you make something, you know, and you do make something that is personal, and this film is very personal to me, and I know it's personal to Kato and to everybody who made it, you know, it's scary. Like, I've never felt so vulnerable in my life, you know, so waiting for this to come out. So hearing you say that is pretty incredible. You made my week.
Wow.
Yeah,
Well,
that's such an honor, truly.
It really
Thank
is.
you.
well, I watch well. You're very much welcome, and it's very much deserved because I watch a lot of films, and it's rare to feel this way about one. So,
Wow.
absolutely. So we haven't got too much time left, so I'm just going to jump straight into some fun questions. The first one is for Kato. So, if Angie could team up with one other fictional horror hero to face the apocalypse, who would they choose to be on their side, and why?
Oh, I love it.
Sally Newborn. No, I mean, she's already on the team. One other fictional horror character. I was so fixated on another question that you sent us that I forgot to fixate on this one.
I didn't even look at the question.
If she's going to try and beat there's part of me that wants like just Toni Collette. Yeah. Maybe she's not a fictional character, but given how much of a badass she is in regards to horror and how much horror she makes, like there's part of me that would be like, yeah, I think Toni Collette could kind of jump in and
nice. I'll do that. And so Luke,
also I would have to say Mads Mikkelsen playing Hannibal, because that would be we would never go hungry.
What an answer. What an answer.
Yeah.
I love it.
I love Mads Mikkelsen so much, and I just want to work with him so bad.
Yes, absolutely. Likewise. And so, Luke, if you could watch one horror film again for the first time, which would it be?
Oh, man. That's a great question. I like that. Usually it's what's your favorite horror film, but this is digs a little deeper. What's the first horror film I could watch for the first time again? I think it might have to be, I want to say, does Alien count?
Oh, yes.
Totally.
Oh,
Absolutely.
yes. Absolutely.
It's like, I'm trying to debate between that or Halloween, but yeah, but Alien maybe just because I do sort of, it's one of those films that I really vividly remember the feeling I got watching it for the first time. And I've seen it so many times since, and it just has an otherworldly power to it. And I just, I remember being, I think that was a film that I watched it and then I immediately watched it again.
Yeah.
Just to try. And of course, once you watch it again, you lose that. But yeah, I think maybe that would be my answer.
Excellent. Well, it's not a bad one at all. It's fantastic. And so I guess, so Kato, so here's a big question for you. So which 80s classic horror villain would give you the most entertaining show as a dancer in a revealer booth? Now, I've given you a short little list to kind of choose from, but I'm going to let you take it away.
Pinhead.
And
hands down, there's so much leather. There are so many chains. It is all theater for him when it comes to what he does, that I imagine that he would just turn it out. I don't know if you saw on Instagram during Halloween, but Megan Thee Stallion dressed up as Pinhead, as like hot Pinhead. And I was obsessed with that. So hands down, that is my choice.
Nice. My birthday is on Halloween. So that's,
Oh,
I know.
nice.
I thought I'd save that for the end because I didn't want to have that run through the entire thing. But yeah, Halloween, baby. Absolutely love it.
Love this so much.
And then, so I guess the last question would be, I guess for both of you, what makes a perfect horror movie soundtrack? What stands out? Is it relevant to the time? Is it something that, kind of elevates it or kind of captures the tone? What is it for you that stands out about a soundtrack or music in a film?
Score, or are you talking about just general soundtrack? Anything?
I guess general sound as well. I mean, so for me, it's a combination of sound effects and I guess score and music as well. But how all of the sound in a film kind of influences it. I mean, obviously, if you've ever shot something without any sound and watched it, it's a completely different experience. So,
if I could tell you, oh man, sound even on this film alone was huge for us. So I completely understand. Kato, do you have an answer? I'm thinking.
Yeah, while you're thinking, I think that I'm such an audiophile, like I'm constantly listening to something. I feel like it's imperative that the score, the sound, the Foley, and the music, anything that's used in horror, in film in general, but in horror in particular, should be like another character in the film itself. Because otherwise you just lose everything that goes with it. I think that the really cool thing that you're seeing, especially like more and more as horror is evolving into this like kind of more high art genre, is this use of sound, or this lack of sound, thinking about A Quiet Place. I think that having sound be an entity in the film, I also think that it just has to thematically make sense. Is it sowing dis-ease? Are you feeling comforted in this moment? It has to kind of run that whole spectrum.
I love that the idea of that it's an organic thing within the film itself, that it needs to not be disjointed, that it needs to be its own beast, I guess, complementing and driving the film as well. Well, so hey, fantastic. I mean, that's pretty much everything that I've got. If there's anything else that either of you want to add, more than welcome to. Otherwise, Revealer will be streaming on Shudder, coming from June 20. It's absolutely fantastic. You have to check it out. Thank you so much, Kato and Luke, for joining me today. Can't wait to see what you bring up next. And
thanks so much, Oxford.
I really hope to see you again. We'll chat again soon.
You too. Thank you.
Cool. Awesome. All right. Cool. Peace out.
Thank you.